So how to make the most of observation and feedback? How do we do that before the observation takes place? What kind of preparation can you do as a mentor before doing the observation to ensure that there are sort of best bets, really, that the student teacher will get the most out of it, and that you capture what is needed in order to help them progress? So before the observation, really start to consider the purpose, and take a moment to consider the student teacher that you have in front of you. As we're all aware, learners are different, student teachers are the same. They come onto the programme with various different experiences, knowledge, skills, perceptions about teaching, dispositions. And so taking a moment to consider that person in front of you before the observation takes place will be a really important step at making sure that you tailor your provision to their needs. So consider where they are in terms of the stage of the course. Is this the start of clinical practice 1, or are they much further along in their developmental journey? Is this sort of towards the end of clinical practice 2, so they've had a lot more experience in the classroom? And based on that, what challenges do they face at this moment in time? What are their current learning needs with regard to developing their teaching practice? Perhaps you're sort of really aware of those because you've just reached a key assessment point with them and a progress review has taken place. So really think about what their needs are as learners. What approaches to observation and feedback have they found beneficial in the past? And if you're coming at this fresh with this student teacher, you perhaps might need to ask them about that. Have they ever been observed before in their previous life as a learner, or in a previous profession? Or were there particular approaches that a previous mentor used with them that they found to be quite beneficial? It's worth asking them that as food for thought. And based on that, how is this going to influence your approach? Consider their stage of development. Are they currently at the unaware stage and therefore quite dependent on your feedback? Or are they moving from aware to capable and therefore almost ready to show greater independence in their self-reflection? Because you're hopefully trying to move them from this place of being quite dependent to being much more independent as they move towards capable. Or are they already capable and confident when they're analysing and evaluating their own practice? And therefore, are you going to need to change your approach and your relationship with the student teacher as a learner when you're approaching observation and feedback as a consequence? And then finally, consider their response to feedback. Now, you might have to ask them about this if you've not observed and fed back to them to this point, if it's the first time. But if they've been on the programme for a little bit of time or you know a bit about them, consider how they respond to feedback. Do they tend to be disabled by feedback, or are they more orientated towards making use of the feedback, being more proactive in responding to that feedback to further their learning? Do they respond better to immediate feedback as soon as possible after the observation has taken place? Now, we know that that's not always possible in the busy working environment of a school, but are they going to benefit from that being as soon as possible after the observation, or do they prefer to have time to reflect on what happened, maybe make some notes, maybe to evaluate the lesson before they come to meet with you for the feedback? So it's really thinking about, again, that student teacher in front of you, how they're going to make the most of this learning experience with you through observation and feedback. And then when you've taken all of that into consideration, you're going to try to reach an agreement on the focus of the observation. Now, depending on the student teacher's needs and stage of development, you're either going to need to establish the focus for the student teacher. Perhaps they're at the unaware stage and everything is potentially, a focus because they need to improve everything at that moment in time. So you might need to give them some guidance to really hone them in on something that's going to be sort of instrumental to their development at that moment in time. Or Are you in a position to start working more closely and collaboratively with your student teacher to establish a focus together based on the student teacher's own reflection on their practice and their evaluation of their pupils' own learning? Indeed, you might be emerging as co-inquirers together, and actually there might be something that you're both concerned about with regard to the class that you're about to observe and feedback on. And so you might work together collaboratively to alight on, to decide on that focus. And then you're going to move on in your preparations before the observation to discuss the lesson plan. Now, I don't think I can stress enough really how important it is to sit down with the student teacher if possible, or at a minimum on your own to look at that lesson plan, because that will sort of codify a lot of the thinking around the lesson and preparation for the lesson that the student teacher will have done. Obviously, if you sit down and look at it with them, you can ask them about it, and you can start to dig into the knowledge that is fed into the lesson plan itself. But most importantly, it's then that you can start to identify any problems, and you can offer feedback before the student teacher comes to teach the lesson. Something that can be, really detrimental to the development of the student teacher is if they have, a really negative experience of an observation. I think if you can head off some of those problems at the pass by giving them feedback on the lesson plan, encouraging some small tweaks before they come to be observed teaching it, then that can really set them in good stead to have a positive experience from the observation. As they develop, you can use this as an opportunity to encourage them to show you their reasoning behind the plan. You can start to get an understanding of how they are comprehending teaching and learning, and if there are any sort of misconceptions, any gaps, or indeed if there's an opportunity for you to sort of interrogate their perspective and get them to sort of interrogate their own perspective on teaching and learning by having a conversation about the plan. So both approaches are an opportunity to check your student teacher's understanding of their practice, and we've got more guidance on this in the appendix in the clinical practice guide entitled Guidance for Mentors Supporting Student Teachers on Planning. So have a little look at that for a more thorough coverage of this aspect.